Welcome to This Week in Coworking, where industry leaders get succinct, actionable insights. Here are your hosts, Hector Kolonas and Mike LaRosa.
It's week 33, and this week in Coworking, we're diving into another episode of the weekly recap. My name is Mike LaRosa, and I'm joined by co-host Hector Kolonas. Hey, Hector, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm not too bad. A really busy week. I'm surprised we only put in 35 items into the newsletter this week. There was around 50 to 70 in the early part of the week. I think we have to curate a little bit more, but yeah, it's a very hectic week. What are we talking about this week, Mike?
I was shocked. I think everyone's back to school has started, so I guess it's also back to work for the adults. This week we're jam-packed. We've got a really cool take that we can geek out a little bit on for parallels between co-working and the hotel industry. You and I love those conversations. We're talking a little bit about AI, of course. There was some cool posts that were shared this week, but there's a lot to dive into for market moves. And so we're going to talk about a lot of franchise movement, and then also talk about some reopenings of locations, some shifting of spaces, brands, merges, and then just one particular brand that doesn't consider themselves co-working, but is most definitely on the rise.
Absolutely. But before we dive in, I want to first say thank you to this week's sponsor, the folks over at iPostal One Workspace. They put a really interesting post into the sponsor slot this week, so definitely go check that out. Really looking at how, if you are doing digital mail, are you thinking about all the ways that you can upsell those customers? It's one thing to bank that check for your virtual mail customers. It's another thing to start upselling them meeting rooms, upselling them services, access to the space, etc. And they put some really good examples into that. So definitely go check that out. They also asked me to say, if you are going to go to the Vast Family Reunion happening next week, go find them. They'll be running around the event, looking to chat more about this and all things digital mail. On that note, I also wanted to send out two great congratulations to the team at Coven Office Reimagined on their 16 years of being awesome, as well as the teams over at Cahoots who turned 15 this week. So huge congratulations to them, but let's dive into the news. Mike, I'm going to hit it over to you for a topic we've never talked about on the podcast. What is the correlation between hotels and co-working?
I know, I'm sure all the listeners' eye rolls are just turning right over. No, it's just another really cool example of tracking where industries are going and understanding that I think a lot of operators are struggling right now with discerning between how do I grow. They know that the opportunity's there, they know that the demand's there, but it's also having to deal with landlords or stakeholders on terms that they might not be familiar with. And so I think a lot of operators are shying away from leases. Sometimes leases do make sense in the right scenarios, but I think it's always good to know what else works and how other ways you can leverage one thing for another. So Accor is a brand of hotels based out of France that has the largest footprint that is outside of the US and China. And so they've got a really unique portfolio of hotels, and they are expanding some new markets. They were very into co-working years ago, acquiring a brand, incorporating it into their hotel portfolio. What they've done here now is that they've actually started to sell off part and then eventually all of the physical holdings, which is no different than what MGM did with their Vegas properties, right? Spun off the operations and the brands of the hotels apart from the actual physical property. These are just different ways to raise capital, but what they did is that they took that capital they raised and they invested back into the brands, the different flags, quote unquote. And this is something that we're seeing, like I said, we're going to dive into market moves that is starting to happen within franchises with merges or whatnot. So I think it's just always useful to see if it worked somewhere else in real estate, how can you apply it to your business goals as an operator? Or if you're a building owner out there listening to this podcast, how do I better work with an operator or consider different types of terms to make that deal happen?
Yeah, well said, Mike. I think it's very interesting because we do take a lot of pages out of the hotel playbook. I do think that keeping that opco-propco separation is definitely something we're seeing happen a lot here in co-working. But it is really interesting to think about. There are quite a few, I'm not going to say many, but there are a decent amount of owner-operators in the industry. Folks like Coven Office Reimagined who own the assets, like Expansive, who own most of their assets. And thinking about what would look like for them to separate out and go from owning the whole building. I know Portals in the newsletter this week as well, they also acquire. So there's a lot of firms who are going in and just making sure they own physical assets. And it's going to be an interesting thing to see if a company like Accor can do what is undone or never done in hotels and letting go of the physical assets. Could this be a move that we start seeing in co-working? Can we start seeing the operators give back or sell the assets but maintain some sort of management agreement or play in the building, but bring in that cash to do mergers and acquisitions, to acquire better technology, to deploy implementations? So it's going to be a really interesting time to see if this is going to ripple across into our industry.
Yeah, and I think that the likelihood of it actually happening is relatively high. Some of the data that we shared in, I think, maybe 2 weeks ago from some of the foreclosure rates just for commercial loans, these are the kind of mechanisms or the deal structures that you need to consider that are non-traditional to take advantage of those opportunities, where in the past maybe you would have just observed the opportunities and said, I don't know how to get into that, or I don't know how to navigate that. These are ways that you can maybe find leverage in other businesses to do.
Absolutely. We're going to dive into some franchise and market moves in a little bit, but before we do that, let's do the second topic we've barely ever spoken about on this podcast. What's happening in AI this week? So we saw quite a few different, my feed is pretty much slammed with AI related stories. We even have one here at Twic that I haven't even shared yet, but we did see one really interesting post. And I don't normally link directly to academic studies, but when the team at NVIDIA and Georgia Tech share a study about what the future of the back end of AI looks like, I think we should all take notice. So just to summarize the story a little bit, if you don't know what LLMs are, they're large language models. They are the backbone for how AI systems understand and reason the language that they speak behind the scenes. But in order to train them, you need to have massive, really expensive, power guggling, is that the right word? Very power intensive data centers, absorbing energy, absorbing time, effort, and cost to train these systems. What NVIDIA did is actually figure out that this is now shifting towards the edge. So away from the data center, you'll be able to have your own AI system trained eventually on your own laptop, on a server in your space, on maybe a set of servers in a co-working space. And this could be a completely new business line if you start looking at, if you don't need to hire server space in an entire data center and you've got basement space in your co-working, maybe this is another revenue source. Maybe this is another way for you to bring in AI ready or AI powered companies into your space by offering this as a service or something you can support. It's early days, but I think it's something we should watch because in AI, things move rapidly. It's like there was nothing for a long time and then it was everything all at once. So I would definitely keep an eye on this, have a read through the study. It is very technical. So maybe throw it back into OpenAI and get it to summarize it into what it looks, ask it for opportunities, maybe look into what the data needs are going to be for the next phase of this, right? Because it's not going to go all the way to the laptop in a year, maybe, I don't know, could age like milk, but it's more likely that you will need to have some sort of server space. I don't know, I haven't been to a co-working space in a long time that have a server room, but maybe we're going to see the resurgence of that and renting out that rack space to do shorts or what is it called? SMLs on premises. So that's a really interesting one. We did see some other AI stories. I'm going to hit this one back to you, Mike, given that you are our resident proximity professional. Someone on your team shared that you guys are working on an AI concierge called Prox. It was an interesting share. The only reason we put it in there is we like to share what innovation is happening. But can you tell us a little bit more about what Prox is from your perspective?
Yeah, so it's been really exciting. I have to say that we're just teasing out the different types of things because AI is so flooded in with news. Everyone's cramming it down. I credit our CEO in showing restraint because I've wanted to go full blown with it. So this is just the concept of leveraging the platform into an interface that can communicate with users that are looking for space. And so it's very meta, because the video that our chief revenue officer shared was actually created using AI, which is really exciting. But it just walks you through the different types of ways that we've trained our own internal to ask the types of questions that we know that users are going through, like walking through the process of how to find a type of space, whether it be a meeting room, a private office, or perhaps a screening room or a training center for 100. We've worked through what are the different things that people need, and then enabling that model to then help that person find that space and then book and transact for it. So it is very early days, but it is exciting. And to bolt on to what you were talking about earlier, we've recently started a project I'm very excited to talk about shortly in Los Angeles in the entertainment industry, where they are actually renting out different types of server rooms as part of their flex workspace offering. So it is interesting to see, as you were saying, it's not just maybe the space to run the local or the LLM, but it's also server rooms, or what are these other types of needs that AI focused companies need, whether they want to be adjacent to their team or just need pop-up for temporary space. So it is really exciting, and it's like constantly keeping up every week as there's something new that the team's talking about.
Yep, it's a really interesting one. I do have a whole bunch of questions, but I think we'll wait for a little bit more of a mature release.
We're much like Taylor Swift and her Easter eggs. We're just like teasing out what we're working on, but I am excited to say that when the time is right, Twic will be the place that we share it officially.
Love to hear that. And we're going to jump into some pretty cool announcements in a sec. A lot of folks saw news in the newsletter this week. Some of the people involved actually messaged and thank you for announcing it. We didn't even announce it yet, but it was in Twic. So thanks for sharing that. On the kind of back end ops here at Twic, if you were on our LinkedIn feed over the last couple of days, you would have seen that we've actually rolled out Twic Play, which is a co-working word search. It is a really fun way just to be a little bit competitive with other readers, other listeners. We've got folks who've found 10 words in under a minute. Everyone's getting all riled up about it. If you fill it in with your work email, it also promotes your co-working brand in the top list. So it's a lot of fun. We've had 300-400 plays so far this week, which is just a cool way to connect with everyone. But the AI piece of that is, I am essentially the only developer here at This Week in Coworking. The entire infrastructure for the game, the security, the releases happening every day, the feedback going from members, becoming new features into bug fixes, is all AI. It is 100% a developer and a DevOps agent working side by side, rolling out these fixes. So a lot of folks reached out to me this week and they're like, Hector, you've got this newsletter stuff, you've got the podcast, you've got everything you guys are doing at Syncaroo. Why the F are you building a game? And honestly, this is the future of enterprises. Everybody will have a team of agents through which they will be able to build fun, interesting, engaging things. And so I wanted to really put that to the test. If I had to wake up on Friday afternoon and say, we need to release something for International Co-working Day on Saturday, can I get it out the door? And not only were we able to, we landed on International Co-working Day, people got involved, it got a little bit viral, people are starting to get very competitive about it. And next week on Monday, we have our first outside of Syncaroo sponsored game. So it's just going to show that you can start creating things. There's a lot of caveats. I am a developer by trade, so I was able to catch some mistakes that the agents did. But all in all, I can totally see a future where the interfaces are not built by the platforms. The interfaces are built by the team. A office manager or a workspace manager who's a Gen Zer comes in, builds their own interface that then has to interact with all of your interfaces. This is the future. There is no reason why we should dictate what the platform looks like. And that's why I liked what you guys are doing at Prox, because you can engage it without the interface. And that is the future that I see. So I just wanted to put that in there as something that I'm really excited about, and something both at Syncaroo and now obviously now at This Week in Coworking, we're investing heavily in. I do want to just caveat that with, as much as we put AI into it, the only thing we will never put AI agents on is the summaries. There is too much context and nuance in our industry to allow AI agents to try and summarize the news for you. And so that will always be human summarized, human edited, and put into your inbox with care.
Speaking of all those summaries, we've got a ton in market moves. I feel going through, like you said, 50 plus different news items from this week. So I think we want to break it up into two different categories, right? We're tackling franchises because there are some interesting trends that we're seeing there. And then we've just got some big openings for spaces that are either reopening or expanding. So for franchise, let's talk about the Coven and Blush Cowork in Cary, North Carolina. I believe that we've got Allison coming on to chat with you. What are you guys going to be talking about, and what's the news behind this story?
So the news this week is that Blush Cowork has actually joined the Coven and will be rebranding as part of their franchise, essentially joining the network, foregoing being an indie operator and becoming part of their franchise. With Allison, I'm going to dig into what was the decision-making process, why now, what other things did she consider, what does it mean, and what does she think the future looks like as part of a franchise. So definitely look out for that. I'll be dropping in the feed as soon as we've got that recorded and processed. But there was also some other franchise news this week, right, Mike?
Yep. So our friends over at Vast had some big announcements. Office Evolution's expanding into Canada, and VentureX has opened their first 2 locations as franchises in India. So there's a lot of expansion going on over there internationally, planning to flag it in new countries for different brands under the Vast umbrella. But for other market moves, the ones that I was really excited to see was BLANKSPACES has returned to Santa Monica. This is really cool. I know I visited the original location multiple times. I believe they were there for 12, 13 years or so, and were not able to extend their location. But they found a new one, so congrats to Jerome. That's opening up. That looks really exciting. It's a cool space. He's really finding a niche and taking over some of these abandoned tech startup locations, which is brilliant because they're already built out to the nines.
Yeah.
They're really cool to hang out there. And then another brand that I know doesn't really embrace the co-working label is Switchyards. I've been to their original location in Atlanta. I always loved it. They've got a cool vibe. It's very much Clubhouse. It's a membership club. The last couple locations that they've opened have actually sold out. They're capping this newest location in Houston to 250 people. They're expecting there to be already a waiting list, or I guess there's already waiting lists on 2 other locations that they've opened. But they've just been on a hiring spree. We've mentioned them briefly in newsletters in the past. They did, I believe, a funding round to fuel this expansion. But yeah, it's a lot of spaces opening up and opening up additional locations.
Yeah. I mean, on the Switchyards one, I'm just fascinated by their model, sitting at around $100 a month per member, capping it at 250 members. You're looking at a total income for the space of $300,000. Like, they have to have some really good unit economics to make that sustainable. Because I know there's no paid staff on premises. The Wi-Fi implementation is pretty much whiteboard passwords. So it's just really interesting to see if this model is sustainable, because they've been on a tear, right? They've opened locations everywhere. They've sold out everywhere, got wait lists across many cities. And people are, I was going to say digging it, but I would definitely age myself. People are really enjoying it, right? We're seeing them pop up in conversations that co-working spaces traditionally don't come up in feeds and influencers, all these people engaging around the brand, which personally I think is a great thing. The more people think about workspace as an ecosystem and not as somewhere that they have to go to, the better it is for all of us. So definitely tip my hat to the Switchyards team and wish them success with their new location.
Yep. So it was a jam-packed week. We've got a lot of other stories in the newsletter, but I think that's all the ones that we're going to tackle on the podcast for this week. Anything you want to leave listeners with, Hector, before we sign off?
Definitely go over to twik.co/play. Give us your quickest time to try and find all 10 words, and be sure to send us your links, whatever you think we might miss. We're doing a better job of curating this, but if you can share your links, twik.co/share, put them right into our inbox. Outside of that, have a fantastic week and weekend.
See you next week.